Uh, oh, right on time. While we are getting into our program, everyone please feel free to start introducing yourselves in the chat and start creating this air of community that we'll be cultivating for the rest of our program. Okay, recording is going and we are going. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of our Pathways to Understanding program. My name is Anna Alhoud, and I am the Adult Education Lead at Community Tampa Bay, a nonprofit organization dedicated to eliminating discrimination in our community through cross-cultural interaction and dialogue. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your host tonight for a very special evening of Pathways. Pathways to Understanding is a joint project between Community Tampa Bay and the Tampa Bay Times Newspaper and Education program, focused on creating space for dialogues that allow Muslim individuals and their neighbors to reach common ground through fostering mutual respect and understanding. So everyone can be aware and on the same page, tonight's panel discussion will be streamed live to our Facebook page for future watching. Only myself and our panelists will be recorded, and all streaming will stop once we go into our breakout rooms, right after the panel discussion. Please keep your video and mic turned off during the panel discussion to avoid any interruptions. And thank you for being a part of tonight's event. Our first two Pathways events dove deep into the myths, assumptions, and stereotypes that affect Muslim communities, as well as the importance of expressing intersectional identities in Islam. Though this program can be enjoyed without having attended these prior events, please feel free to access those recordings through the link being dropped in the chat. For a bit of context, almost 20 years have passed since the September 11th attacks, an event that fostered a significant amount of Islamophobia in the United States and around the world. And in light of the current challenges facing Muslim countries, such as Palestine and Afghanistan, tonight's topic of Islam and allyship is especially relevant. Our panel and discussions will focus on the importance of bridging gaps between Muslim and non-Muslim communities to better promote allyship in overcoming obstacles unique to Muslim individuals. In other words, tonight's program will help us all understand the importance of being an effective ally, as well as the steps we can take to disrupt prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination in the spaces that we inhabit. Before we turn to tonight's agenda, our team would like to share a recent fantastic development about the Pathways to Understanding program. Last week, Pathways was awarded first place in the 2021 National Newspaper Association Better Newspaper Editorial Contest. This recognition in the partnerships category affirms the impact that we have in these spaces and hopefully serves as further encouragement to continue building bridges through dialogue and compassion. Our team at Community Tampa Bay would like to thank our partners at Tampa Bay Times for their tireless commitment, as well as the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, whose generous support has been instrumental in producing these community programs. And of course, these events could not happen without our community of engaged participants that truly give life to these discussions. Thank you all. On that note, let's continue the positive Pathways legacy by diving into tonight's agenda. Our panel of impressive guest speakers will last 40 minutes, followed by small group discussions where our participants will have 30 minutes to share their insights in talks guided by our trained Community Tampa Bay facilitators. As a creative way to share the highlights we experience in our groups, we'll be collectively creating a word cloud from the highlights of our discussions in our talks. Our last portion of Pathways will involve reflecting on the themes that emerged in our small group discussions with our panelists for an informal Q&A session. Throughout the program, we invite all participants to interact with each other and our panelists in the chat. All questions to panelists will be answered during our Q&A session, so don't be shy about asking. This space is designed to foster respect and connection, so please be respectful and don't forget to have fun. Additionally, our team has created a follow-along document that we invite you to use during the panel to organize your thoughts and inspire ideas for discussions in our small groups. You can find this document in the chat now. So, allow me to please introduce our panelists. Our first guest is a community organizer whose family comes from Jordan and Palestine. Her tireless efforts with Students for Justice in Palestine and Resistance of Tampa Bay have resulted in protests promoting human rights for populations in several Muslim countries. Being Muslim herself, this guest strongly believes in bridging people together despite the differences that keep them apart. Additionally, her current projects, such as Block the Boat, continue to engage communities in advocacy for Palestine specifically. I'm very happy to welcome Mirna Abu Shanab to the program. Hi, Mirna.
Thank you.
Our next two guests represent the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art and have been working in the realm of allyship for many years. Zeba Rahman, whose ancestry has Afghan and Arab roots, identifies culturally as South Asian Muslim. She was born in India. Zeba spearheads the Building Bridges program of the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art, which is part of the Doris Duke Charities. This program provides funding to support inclusion and equity across communities and has awarded grants to community-based programs like Pathways. Her urge to advocate for others comes from her father's legacy of activism. He became part of the Indian resistance movement against the British in the 1940s. In fact, his role was to carry and deliver messages for movement leaders. In this capacity, he delivered a package to Gandhi and speaks with pride about the conversation that he had with him. As the first full-time senior program officer at the Doris Duke Foundation, Zeba has helped fund numerous projects focused on bridging communities through art, dance, theater, and dialogue. Her work for equity continues with her recent role as co-chair of the Racial Equity Committee for the Board of Grantmakers in the Arts. Thank you, Zeba, for being on the show. Linda Artola, our next guest from the Doris Duke Foundation, is a non-Muslim ally whose life experience has taught her the power of supporting others through compassion. Born during the Nicaraguan Civil War, Linda's family fled Nicaragua and successfully put down roots in this country when she was very young. Having always felt connected to her ancestral land, as well as her adopted home of New York, Linda completed her education in communications and journalism in Nicaragua before returning to the States to pursue work. Her connections to the Latina community, experiences as an intern at Democracy Now!, and freelancer working in the translation and arts fields allowed her to work with people from all walks of life. This ability to empathize with others led to her current role as program associate for the Building Bridges program. Her passion for advocacy is also evident in her presence at the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. Thank you, Linda, for being with us tonight. Our final guest, Tanya Diaz Clevenger, is also a non-Muslim ally and the daughter of Cuban immigrants and entrepreneurs. Tanya pursued a law degree from Stepton University's College of Law, where she rediscovered her passion for justice and equality before becoming a member of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, where she investigated discrimination claims. She became the Civil Rights Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, also known as CARE, in 2011, where she fielded hundreds of legal intakes for civil liberties issues, as well as offered Know Your Rights seminars across Florida. This year, Clevenger was named CARE National Chief Operating Officer as its Capitol Hill headquarters in Washington, D.C. Tanya now looks forward to continuing this community bridging work at the national level and working with all of CARE's chapters. Thank you, Tanya, for joining us. At this point, I would like to call attention to all of our panelists and to welcome you into this space. Thank you for being here. To start off our discussion, I would like to ask what examples of effective or ineffective allyship for Muslim communities have you seen in the past year? And feel free to unmute and we can start off our discussion.
Okay, I guess I'll go. So I'm a community organizer. I've worked in the Tampa Bay community throughout my whole life, but specifically the last couple years, like last 2 and 3 years, I got really into it. And so the big protest we had at Curtis Hickson Park, it was my first real protest because I was in the past few years helping with Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So it was never really like Palestinian protests. I know there were some on 56, but at that time there was like something that needed to be done. And I looked into my comrades at Black Lives Matter, and they gave me so much advice on how to spread word and what kind of support I need, who to talk to, where to get the equipment from. And they were there for me through every step of the way and to get a successful protest.
Got you. Got you. Thank you, Mirna. I'm also interested to know how, the challenges that you faced in community organizing over this past year. I'm sure that also wasn't easy.
Yeah, I know because at that time period, everyone wanted to organize something. Everyone wanted to put their mark down. So everyone was doing their own thing, and to find support was very hard for me at that time. So I was grateful for the community and the support that I had already had through Black Lives Matter and through other through the people I met through Black Lives Matter, and the support they provided me with, because I would not have done anything for it, because even though I helped, I wasn't sure what I needed, because some people were telling me, oh, I needed permits, but I didn't know if I actually needed permits or if I should even be speaking to TPD about this, because they're the same people that like arrested us the summer before, and they're the same people. So I wasn't sure which approach to take. And my friends were like, just go along with it and we'll see what happens and we'll deal with it when it goes. So it was like every day was this close to canceling the whole thing for our safety and especially for the people that were coming out.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Hi, Danielle. I'm so sorry. Could you please turn off your video for the panel discussion? For the small group discussion, though, turn it right back on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mirna, as well. So already we've seen that just here in Tampa Bay that, community organizing around, protests for Palestine, as well as just supporting marginalized Muslim communities has its challenges. Linda, Tanya, or Zeba, do you have any experiences or have you witnessed anything over the past year that relates?
Well, I should start by saying thank you very much for having us participate in this wonderful conversation. The role of the Building Bridges program, our focus is to create connections and understanding across communities and across difference. So that's our core motivation for supporting the work that we do at the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art. And in terms of actually choosing a couple of examples, it's a little bit hard, but I'll try. One example that I can think of is the series called Secret Life of Muslims, which is a mini series online that has been created by Joshua Seftel, who is Jewish and who works with a whole circle of producers and advisors who are from the American Muslim community. And he's created these series over 2 seasons that focus on, they're mini-sodes that focus on portraits of American Muslims. Linda, feel free to chime in, but it's been a very successful 2 seasons. They're now working on their 3rd season. So that's one example that comes to mind. And I'll turn it over to Linda to add to this or offer another example.
Thank you, Zeba.
Yeah, both things for me now for having us. It's exciting to be part of this conversation. And so one example that I can think of, it's true that it's hard, but right now what it comes to my mind is well, with what is happening right now in Afghanistan, for example, like in the social media world, like I've seen, a lot of solidarity, like a lot of sharing of information, articles, pictures, etc. And I feel that solidarity, it's very important and it's good to see it. But then there was this picture circulating of these young girls in Afghanistan from the 1970s, I believe, and they were wearing like Western clothing, and they were using that image as a comparison to women wearing hijabs. And that to me, like, it really caught my attention, because I was like, well, like, you want to make a point about, the issues that are happening there, what they're confronting. But then to me, like, that was problematic to use that as a way to compare, or to use that image just like to, just to like ask for help for them. So I think that it's an example of like good solidarity, or solidarity with a good intention, but then a challenging or ineffective way to share solidarity.
I hear that, and I love that already we're touching on these themes of what is appropriate or what is effective, and what is maybe misguided in how we're trying to show our allyship. Absolutely. So this understanding, this principle of understanding and getting to know and learn about the communities that you want to support, in this context our Muslim communities, this definitely relates to how we're showing up. And I love that already we're kind of focusing on this, we're in this hybrid reality now, physical and virtual. So thank you for mentioning that, those examples. And Zeba, could you repeat one more time the Secret Lives of Muslims, I believe this is the name of the project?
Yes, it's called Secret Life of Muslims, and it's produced by Smarty Pants Productions. That's Joshua Seftel's production company, and they have their own website. You can look at their minisodes. They've been nominated for, I believe, an Emmy and other awards, and it's incredible what they've been able to show in 3 minutes as a character sketch, including of somebody who was formerly very anti-Muslim, a white man, who then scrapped his plans to bomb the local mosque, and was invited into the community, the Muslim community, and eventually became a Muslim and a strong advocate for Muslims.
Wow. Wow. It's definitely transformative when we kind of put aside our own egos and the way that we've been conditioned in a lot of ways to actually see people as humans and to see how we connect to them. Which leads me to my next question, where I'd like to center our Muslim panelists' voices a bit more, and also as well our non-Muslim allies can come forth. But what examples of allyship exist within or between Muslim communities, such as between groups of Muslim women, Muslim immigrants, using these different aspects of our identities within Islam? Mirna, Zeba, or Tanya or Linda, if you have any examples of how this might work, or how you personally show up for different communities within Islam.
Certainly, I can think of so many examples that, again, it's hard to choose, but I would say one that is particularly moving is the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which is a cross-community initiative, but it also includes members of the Muslim community from different backgrounds, different ethnicities and races. And I noticed that there is more cooperation and allyship within the Muslim community, particularly between women, which was something that was an issue before, because as we know, the African-American Muslim community was very often unheard or forgotten. And now there's a big effort, particularly I'm thinking about organizations like Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network in Chicago on the South Side, where they really focus on building those allyships.
Definitely. And thank you for bringing up especially the community of Muslim women as well, because I know with the coverage of Afghanistan, there's been a lot of concern as to how women's rights will be affected by the Taliban's return and what that means for them. And I'd like to, kind of open this up too, not just into how we personally ally, but also maybe what you share, what you see on your news feeds, or what you think is productive in helping gain rights back for women in Muslim countries such as Afghanistan.
I don't want to hog the conversation, but absolutely, I agree with you. I think this is a critical moment. I should say that unfortunately, the American foreign policy has created and really weaponized the Taliban. They were poor, mainly men from Afghanistan that fought the proxy war for America against Russia. And it started with the administration of Jimmy Carter, and then got taken up by Ronald Reagan and presidents on, Democrats and Republicans since then. So it's actually not a 20-year war, it's more like a 40-year engagement and war, covert and then overt. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, Zeba. Thank you. Definitely keeping in context how our government, its actions have consequences, no? Tanya, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're talking about, allyship and where we've created more groups and what's changed in the last 12 months. And I can't help but think, not only as an ally, but also, as I'm watching, the Muslim community organize and just seeing how beautiful it is when you see these relationships built between the intersections because of how diverse the community really is. And they're strengthening each other just much the same way that we need to strengthen our relationship and ally building on other issues in other communities. And one of the things I've loved over the last 10 years of working specifically with the Florida Muslim community, now I'm at the national level, but just on that grassroots level, is watching how, bringing back the question from last time, how the challenges from last year and being virtual has allowed people to come forward more, to ask questions, to become knowledgeable, and for the community itself to have these voices on these intersectional inter-community issues and coming together, like you mentioned, the racism issue, and how we're bringing that to the forefront. And, again, a lot of great stuff has happened, a lot of hard stuff, but a lot of great stuff has happened in the world of being an ally and giving voices to those that need to be heard right now.
Definitely. Absolutely, Tanya. I completely agree with you. And I think that it's also hard. No, it's difficult to kind of overcome this shyness and this definitely unwillingness to offend, right? We don't want to offend in our learning, but we have to learn in order to better ally.
And it's interesting because when we offend, right? And I certainly have inserted foot in mouth so many times as an ally over the last 10 years, but being able to say sorry, right? And one of the beautiful things of working with this community is the acceptance too of wanting to teach, to educate on just how different everything is. And I think the foot in mouth has taught us a lot in this program itself, pathways to understanding and all the things that are being taught, not just in this series, but the rest of the series. It's really amazing. I think a lot of this wouldn't have really come to fruition without the challenges we've seen and being able to, identify where we've misstepped along the way. And, as a Latina, I feel like there's a lot of similarities, and sometimes even I take for granted my own bias and my own privilege just by saying that we're similar. Just like I said, I've seen a lot of rise in the last, like I said, at least in the last 12 months of the different groups within the community really coming together to expand the voices of Islam and the different perspectives.
Definitely, definitely. And I do think, again, bringing back this context of what life has been like over the past 20 years. Obviously, Islamophobia, it existed in some realm, before 9/11, but 9/11 definitely ramped that up in the United States. And just looking at how our media has changed, how, back then, if you wanted to learn, yes, you could go and actually go out and connect with Muslim communities, but a lot of times you were receiving news, you were receiving a lot of, unproblematic news that we can definitely look at now and say, okay, that wasn't, coming from a good place. But now we have social media and we have all these different ways of connecting with each other. And just like you said, Tanya, working together to not just learn, but to advance progress for the struggles of the communities that are being affected by them, especially Muslim communities. So that kind of turns me to our next question, which is, has anyone noticed a correlation between, news coverage of Muslim-related events, such as the 2016 Muslim travel ban, for one, and allyship for Muslim communities? And do you think this is more helpful or harmful in the long run, this type of fad allyship? And I'd actually like to direct this to Myrna or Linda to get us into the space, also given your experiences.
I think at the moment, like Muslim in the news is still very like a taboo subject. And even if they do cover it, they don't complete the whole coverage. For example, we've seen like the New York Times where the kids that were murdered in Gaza, their faces were on there, but it was something that Palestinians or Muslims had to sponsor to get up there. So for Muslims to be a light in the news, I feel like we have to push for that. It's not something that just happens. Another example I'm going to use, I'm just going to keep mentioning Palestine because that's what I'm more familiar with. For example, they'll post all the positives about Israel, like pink washing and stuff like that. And they'll say, but back home, you can't do that here because you'll get murdered. They'll say, but Israel is a safe space for you guys. But if you look at like the statistics, it's really not. So I feel like they always put a narrative in the news that people will want to hear to back up their claim and to make Muslims feel like lower than them or almost barbaric and not up to the date that we're in.
Got you. And Myrna, I'd like to ask you, because I know that you have a lot of experience in community organization and actually helping people come together to learn more. So what resources do you think that people could use or go to or, really start discovering to get around those harmful narratives?
I feel like the best thing you can do is to speak to a Palestinian. I know that's like in some communities, you're like, where do I even find one? Palestinians are pretty outspoken and they speak from personal experiences or from families' experiences, stories that are passed down. And no matter where you look on the news, it's always twisted around. No matter, it could be like the best article that you've read so far about Palestine, but it's still going to be twisted around. If it's not written by an actual Palestinian, you're not going to get the correct information about it.
Okay, so I hear you saying pretty much that we have to start centering the voices that are at the center of these stories.
Because again, Palestinians are very outspoken. They've been waiting for their voices to be heard. They've been doing community organizations for so long. It's just now becoming popular. Maybe 5 years ago, if you spoke about Palestine, you would have get kicked out of your job or you would have. So it's slowly becoming normalized. And so I feel like allies should take advantage of the situation, of the current situation that's on right now, that's happening.
Got you. So really kind of step into that space of dialogue and more so than dialogue, but also listening, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Myrna.
And so what I've seen in our own program, in the Village Bridges program, we see a correlation directly in the work that we do. For example, after the Muslim ban in 2016, in 2017, I was actually new in the program. I barely knew what I was doing, but I got to manage to to push that competition. And that was an historic moment for us because the number of applications that we received, it's been the largest number ever. And that directly spoke to us about the interests of different organizations just wanting to create projects, to engage or work with the Muslim community. I don't know if this is bad or good in the long term. I would like to believe that it is good, but of course, the way to get there, to get to a point where we are satisfied or happy with, with the changes that are happening, I think we do have a long way to go. But at least like the way that I think about this is that, we have to go through all this mess to really make changes. And this applies not only to the Muslim community, but I feel that this applies to every single community. So yes, we do see a correlation in a program that, there are more organizations wanting to engage, to work with the Muslim community. And one thing that I've learned through this work too is that, we don't only want to learn. I think we want to work together, because that's also like, I just feel that sometimes, we just ask for the community to teach us, and this happens in different contexts and with different communities. But my goal will be to actually work together for the well-being of everyone. So yeah, in the media, yes, I agree that a lot of the coverage is problematic, but and we have a long way to go. And one of the things that we also do as part of the competition grantees is that we work with a consultant, with a media consultant, and we provide, they provide strategic media and spokesperson training to them, so they can change this, so they can be part of the dialogue. They're ready to step up and speak for themselves and really represent their community, because yes, that it's a problem that we see, and that we just want to help the community to have a voice in the newsrooms, and when giving an opinion, when writing an article, etc. But yeah, that's
Thank you, Linda. That's so interesting to hear that interest. It's a spike, and it's sounding like, from all of your responses, that there are pros and there are cons, right? The dialogues are changing, they're becoming more open, but at the same time, there come those struggles between how do you respectfully learn, and also how do we change the bigger narratives that are affecting more of our country than just our news feeds.
Yeah, and if I can, Anna, yeah, I mean, I think we talk about, so the Muslim ban, a lot of interest, so grateful for so many people that stepped up, specifically when people were stuck at the border or the airports. I mean, the amount of help that we received to deal with those hundreds of calls that rapidly came in, just to the care for our office. I can't imagine what the immigration offices were like. It was heartwarming. The amount of funds that came in because of the coverage of what was happening, because of the hate speech that was being used against the community. Again, people stepped up and said, how can we help? Yeah. But, when we're talking about long-term, long run, it was a little disheartening to see that it was people cared. So that's good. I think those of us who have been in the fight for a long time really appreciated to have someone say, we recognize what's happening. On the other hand, suddenly politics change and allyship drops, and the foundations that had partnered believe that the issue is resolved. And so when you tie this back to a historical civil rights and the issues we still feel from minority communities, right? How do we keep saying we're going to respond to an action rather than the things that occurred that got us here, right? To Linda's point about the media and the training and interacting, so important that we share those resources with all our community, because of how to speak. We've seen a big shift, even in the 10 years I've been with CARE, on how the media would approach us, right? When, let's say, some sort of horrendous crime happened, attack happened. and how that changed from 2011 to how forward now, the concern shifted to the concern for the community. So that was a lot of intentional work. And as allies, as fighters in this for equal rights, how do we just not hold on to that one moment of the Muslim ban happened? Everybody wants to help at that moment. Everybody wants to go to the airport. But what I need you to do is XYZ, right?
Right.
And so.
Absolutely. No, I think that's an excellent point. And, this emphasis on how are we shifting this individual engagement, I don't want to say in the fad, but in the event, in the development, right? And how do we shift that to a systemic type of situation, a community, and then systemic change, so that this isn't just a reoccurring thing of, oh, okay, all right, now this happened again, where our attention is back, or, oh, okay, now we're back. No, but instead of how am I sustainably allying for communities that need my help? Absolutely. And that it's not even a need my help, it's more of a bridging, it's more of a partnership. How do we help one another achieve our goals for progress and for equality that we all deserve? Absolutely. And kind of coming off of Linda and Tanya's best or last comments here, I want to ask, we only have a couple more minutes for our panel. It goes so quickly when the conversation is so good, but I want to ask everyone, if you were to say one thing that is most important to you, how, and this can be from non-Muslim perspective or from a Muslim perspective, but in what ways do you continue to better yourself as an ally in the Muslim community or to the Muslim community? What is one thing that you believe has definitely helped your allyship? And we can start off with, let's see, Zeba.
I would say particularly in this COVID era that we're going through, and before that as well, I have really committed to embedding myself in the American Muslim community. I am from the community, but really embedding across all the different communities that we hold within our community, and reaching out to African American Muslims and African Muslims, and then East Asian Muslims, Cambodian Muslims. Pol Pot, by the way, and his regime went after Cambodian Muslims first and decimated them before he went after Cambodian Buddhists. So that's what I try to do. That's what I'm committed to, is really go deeper, listen better, and just try and keep an open mind to learning.
Thank you, Zeba. Openness and willingness to listen and learn. Thank you. Myrna, you are next on my screen, so I'll turn to you next.
It's like, what better ways to continue your allyship?
Yes, whether in the community or, I know you're in the community, so maybe you can speak from that perspective.
So I was raised here throughout most of my life, and I feel like to better be able to argue my point on Islam, I need to keep learning more about it. So that's what I work on personally, on learning more about it, to know how I can answer people's questions, or people try to debunk what I say, and how I can back it up.
Excellent. So I'm hearing also a little bit of perspective shifting in there. It's not just look at this issue from how you identify with it and what you know about it, but also how other people might be coming at it and the questions that they're going to be bringing to you. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, Myrna. Tanya, you are next on my screen. So I'm going to throw it on over to you.
Seba and Myrna, I think you guys said that beautiful, the education piece, the listening, the learning, constantly. I think I'm always second guessing myself as an advocate to how to learn better, to listen, and then know where I have the privilege through networking to connect the right person to the conversation, right? And acknowledging when I haven't done the best job of that, and sharing that, right? Like with others who are not from the community, to say, I messed up. I said this, this, and this, and really, I should have given this platform over to somebody else who could articulate it better. And it's through the networking, it's through the engagement of learning the differences in community members to find the best voice. That's what I could do as an ally, right? Is make sure that if the person doesn't have the skill in a specific thing, helping them develop those skills so they can speak for themselves.
Yes, absolutely, Tanya. And I love that piece, because I think that a lot of non-Muslim individuals, and particularly, beginning allies, they are not sure how to navigate that space of how do I give up that space and my, privilege in whatever space I hold to be able to make sure other voices can come to the forefront and make their voices heard. Well said. And Linda, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think everyone said a little bit of what I think too. And I just sit with myself, like I felt uncomfortable, but I always like to ask questions. Like I'm a very curious person, and I feel that I just like to learn. And like if I don't know the answer, I always go to Seba. I have her as my colleague and as my mentor, which is a great value. But I'm always just curious, and I'm always curious to learn about this community, but other communities too. And like, how do you center their voices? Like, how do you sit with that? How do you implement the learnings in other communities? So like, I feel that learning, questioning, feeling uncomfortable or comfortable, I think that's the constant thing. And that's not only, for the work that I do, but as a person, like I always question myself about like, what's the purpose of me in society, and how can I be an ally for everyone? But then in my work particular, I have the privilege to serve and work for this community. So yeah, always learning.
I love that. And I really love how you're bringing up this idea of unity through allyship as well, and being able to identify with the different struggles that people hold, also recognizing that they are not your own struggles, but always looking for how we can better ally and just better help our neighbors, better help our fellow human beings, because at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're human beings. No matter what you practice, how you pray, you're a human being. So thank you all. I just want to thank you all for your insights. Just like that, we're at the end of the panel portion of our program. But I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists. All of you come from amazing walks of life, and you bring your own experiences. And thank you for sitting with us and sharing your insights, which we will also be able to come back to after we come into our small group discussions. So our next portion will be our small group discussions, where we will reflect on what's been said on our panel today. In just a moment, we will separate our audience into breakout rooms, where they will be guided by Community Tampa Bay facilitators in sharing thoughts on what was said in this panel. To our audience, please feel free to use the follow along document as a tool to share your thoughts that came up throughout our panel discussion. We will be in these breakout rooms for 30 minutes before coming back to this main room for a large group share out. Remember to put any questions for our panelists in the chat when we come back, if you haven't already done so, because there will be an opportunity for our panelists to answer these questions after we all come back. So without further ado, I believe we're breaking off to our breakout rooms.